Tensions are running high. The Russian president has implemented his plan in motion. Referendums are being held in Moscow-held regions of Ukraine. The referendums in Eastern Donetsk and Luhansk regions, as well as in the Southern Kershaw and Zaporizhzhia regions, are to decide whether these regions will become part of Russia. Kyiv and the West have dismissed the voting as a sham. The four regions represent around 15% of Ukrainian territory. So what's really happening on the ground? Well, the voting has begun in Kremlin-engineered referendums that has set the stage for a sharp escalation of the 7-month military operation. And some residents are actually backing the polls. Now, many experts have questioned the timing of the referendum. They come after Vladimir Putin announced this week a mandatory troop call-up. About 300,000 reservists would be sent to the front lines in the Ukraine war. The mobilization comes after Ukrainian forces seized back most of the northeastern Kyiv region in a huge counter-offensive operation. Now, Kyiv has retaken hundreds of towns and villages under Russian control for months, and questions remain over the legitimacy of the referendum. The referendums which are underway are reminiscent of one in 2014 that saw Ukraine's Crimea annexed by Russia. Western capitals have maintained that the vote was fraudulent and hit Moscow with more sanctions in response. French President Emmanuel Macron told the UN General Assembly that the referendums are a travesty. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov lashed out at the accusations, condemning Ukraine for driving quote-unquote Russophobia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky denounced the referendums as a farce and hailed Western allies for their condemnation of Russia's moves. While the referendums are underway, fierce fighting also continues. Look at these, some of the visuals released by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. It shows thermite bombs being dropped over a freshly liberated Ukrainian village in the Donetsk region. Elsewhere, Ukrainian gunners continue to target Russian troops. These visuals show BM-21 Grad rocket launchers. It's 40 tubes able to launch 122 mm rockets that can hit targets up to 20 kilometers away. Now, for more on this, we are being joined by Boris Volhonsky from Moscow, who is an international affairs analyst from Moscow State University. To understand the situation better, welcome to the broadcast, sir.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Yes, sir. Now, my first question to you is, in the past month, Kyiv says it has regained swathes of ground in southern part of Ukraine. And at a time like this, 4 referendums have been announced. Can you comment on the timing of this voting?
Well, if you ask my personal opinion, I would say that the referendums should be held not at this time, but 8 years ago, because the real desires of the people in Donetsk and Luhansk regions is very clear. They want to be reunited with Russia. Yeah. There's no word of annexation. Well, you use this word annex in regard to Crimea. It's not annexation, it's reunification of the Russian people who were divided after the collapse of the Soviet Union. As for now, well, I think its time has come, and now the leadership understands that it's time to be together.
Right, then what do you think Kremlin's response is to Kyiv's statement, calling the referendum as illegal?
Well, actually, if anything is illegal in this context, it's the current Nazi regime in Kyiv, which came to power as a result of an illegal coup d'etat back in 2014, and which continues the policies of genocide against the population of what is still the eastern Ukraine. So the will of the people cannot be illegal. You cannot neglect the will of the people. And as for all sociological data, in Donetsk and Luhansk republics, more than 90% are in favor of reunification with Russia. In Kherson and Zaporizhzhia may be a little bit lower, but it's still more than 80%. So the will of the people cannot be illegal, I don't know. And when Zelensky says that, well, this referendum is a farce, we should remember that he's a clown himself. So the very regime there is a farce.
Now, you know, amid all of this, there is a lot of talk around international recognition. Washington has already said that it will not accept the vote. But do you think Moscow is even looking for that? Because case in point, Crimea, since 2014, Russian forces have held their ground despite no recognition by the West. Now, you call it a reunification of Russia, but the West continues to call it an annexation.
Well, you know, I wouldn't say that Russia is looking for non-recognition. I think that Russia is just not caring about whether the West recognizes it or not, because the sanctions against Russia prove that they can. This is a double-edged sword, and the West suffers much more than Russia. Russia's economy is not shattered. Russia is still going along a very normal process of normal living here. So we are pursuing our national interests. We are pursuing our national targets, purposes, and if the West is not going to recognize it, it's up to the West.
Right, okay, we'll leave it there then. That was Boris Volhonsky joining us from Moscow.
Thank you.
Now for more on this, we are also being joined by a guest from Kyiv. His name is Dmitry Zolokhin. He is a former Deputy Minister of Information Policy of Ukraine. Welcome to the broadcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Now, my first question to you is, the voting has already begun for the referendums in 4 regions of Ukraine. Can you explain to our viewers why Kyiv sees this as illegal?
Well, first of all, it's needed to be said that when Russian President Vladimir Putin met with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and he said that they're willing to stop the fight, they're willing to stop the war as soon as it's possible, he lied. He lied because he has announced the new mobilization, and he announced that those territories that occupied by Russian army in Ukraine will be annexed. That is the proof of that Russian president has lied. And now what we see now is not a referendum, is not an election, is not a democratical expression of the will of people. This is a theatrical play that is being called a referendum. There will not be any referendum at all. Russian authorities and Russian army will just declare that they have run the referendum, that they have provided all the means that to draw the decision of the referendum, and declare, as your previous guest said, that those people kind of want to reunite with other people in Russia. This is just not true. This is just lies. There will be no referendum at all. There will be just a theatrical play as a referendum. Secondly, it's needed to be said that referendum as the form of the expression of the will of the people on certain territory, and I underline this is a free will of the people, cannot to be provided with the gun pointed at your head and the gun pointed at your children, as we have seen in many cities in Ukraine that are liberated from Russian army, in Bucha, Mariupol, Kharkiv, Izum, other cities. There are so many atrocities that prove that people are being tortured, people are being killed, people are being raped. So if you are torture people and you kill people, you cannot say that they express their free will at some referendum, at some theatrical play that is being provided there. So there will not be a referendum. There will just be a declaration of Russian Federation that they have provided it, and just present the numbers that they will draw on certain document, a certain fake document. The same as Vladimir Putin has said to Mr. Modi, that they will try to stop the war. That was lies, and that also will be lies.
Right now, it is a little like history repeating itself. Now, back in 2015, Russia annexed Crimea in a very similar way. So in the present time, once the voting concludes, of course, what options do you think Ukraine will be left with?
Ukraine doesn't have any options. We will fight for our freedom. We will fight for our people living on the occupied territories, including Crimea, including Donbass, including Eastern and Southern territories that are being now under occupation of the Russian army, because people are being killed and tortured, and we cannot just leave them there despite of what Russia is saying. So we just do not have any options, because we're gonna fight and we're gonna liberate our land till the internationally recognized borders of Ukraine.
And my last question to you is, before I let you go, Vladimir Putin started the invasion by calling it a special military operation. Then 7 months later, he says taking over the entire country was never the goal. So if a referendum was the goal, then why do you think places like Bucha or Lviv were targeted in the first place? Do you think it was Kremlin's strategy all along, or the counter-offensives near Kharkiv made them change their goal?
The answer is the same. Vladimir Putin lies all the time, just changing his mind into the aims of the operation, into his strategies, because the lie is his personal and lifetime strategy. He lied to Prime Minister Modi. He lied to all the world that it's going to be some kind of denazification, demilitarization, which are not understandable terms for either Russians or any people in the world. And now they're saying that they're gonna reunite someone with somebody. So it's just another lies that is just underlining the biggest strategy of Moscow and Kremlin to lie to everybody and to express their inability to run their country as that someone is trying to attack them, like NATO, like Ukraine, or whatever. So now he's not changing the aims. He's just changing his lies. He lied before. He lied when the Crimea was annexed. He lied when he explained why it was annexed. Now he lies to everybody, including Indian people, about what are the real aims of this activity. You call it whatever, special operation, or we call it war, because missiles and bombs are just falling on our heads. So we just call it war. You name it as you like, but it's just a world that created by Russian president's lie, and it's not ending.
Right, we'll leave it there. Thanks for all your insights. That was Dmytro Zolotukhin joining us from Kyiv.